As I said, my name is Jesse Carlton, and I didn't mention it, and I am an editor at the Hardware Retailing magazine, the North American Retail Hardware Association. And today's webinar is about pricing, making sure the price is right. It's kind of a follow-up to the to the article we did in the August issue of the magazine, and about how you can be smart with your pricing, especially in light of some of the technology that's changing the way consumers shop. What we will discuss today is we will discuss some of the trends affecting pricing. We want to talk about some of the best pricing practices, because pricing doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's not just about the right prices. We're also going to talk about managing customer perception, because how consumers perceive your prices matters just almost as much as what your prices are. So we're going to talk kind of about those three things. And here to help us, we have a couple panelists, a couple experts in the field, and we have them on the line. First off is Kevin Kane, and he is the Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing at RivalWatch. RivalWatch provides online competitive pricing and assortment information to retailers as well as consumer product manufacturers around the country. And through the RivalWatch service, they can report prices from a range of retail outlets, including big boxes, so that a retailer can know if the store is priced competitively. And they price shop. You can get prices locally as well as nationally, and it helps a retailer raise his margins and maybe shed that if you think you have a high-priced image and you want to know how to fix it. A good price shopping can help that as well. So, Kevin, welcome.
Thank you very much, Jesse. Appreciate it.
All right. And we'll give contact information for both of our panelists later on. Our second panelist is Phil Mitchell, and he is a retail consultant with Discovery-Based Retail. And he's a sought-after speaker, a sought-after retail consultant, as well as author of the book Discovery-Based Retail, and the founder of the company by the same name. And his company offers a variety of services, including store design and profitability coaching, as well as general consultant services to retailers who want to improve their stores. So he has a lot to say about the general practice of retail as well as pricing. So, Phil, welcome. Welcome to our webinar.
Thanks, Jesse. I appreciate the opportunity.
We thank both of you for taking the time today, and we hope this will be profitable to everyone who's listening. We're going to start off, said that we have kind of three main topics that we're going to talk about, and the first is we want to look at some trends in the world of pricing and what kind of started the idea for this webinar and this article in our minds was what are some of the things in terms of technology that are affecting pricing today. And one of the first things that comes to mind are smartphones. They're kind of the newest players in the price wars. A few years ago we had the discounters that were making people rethink the way they price their stores, and now we have smartphones. And whether or not you think it's impacting yourself a lot as a retailer in your market right now, it may soon be, and it's changing the way consumers are shopping. What are smartphones good for? Well, you can compare prices just about anywhere. You can price shop wherever you are on an item-by-item basis. You can read product reviews, and consumers can also find coupons quickly and easily on their smartphone. So the bottom line is shoppers can compare prices and buy anywhere they want. And before we talk much about it, or too much farther, let's just give a few examples of, there's many different types of apps out there that help smartphone users or smartphone consumers, and one of them, maybe the most popular, is Red Laser. You can use this little app to price shop on the spot. You can be anywhere, scan a barcode, come up with a list of of retailers around, see what prices they're selling that item for, and then even go straight to their website and make a purchase. So Red Laser, as well as other apps like it, are becoming popular with consumers. They're out there. Coupon Sherpa is another example of a kind of a coupon sourcing app. You can find coupons for retailers pretty easily. You don't necessarily have to wait for the paper to come or for the mail to come and collect them in a little box somewhere. You can just find them and store them on your iPhone so they're ready anytime you want them. Maybe the most famous one of this type is Groupon, and what Groupon has done is it has offered deep discounts on products and services. It's not just your 10 to 15% off coupon. It's as much as 50 to 90% off a promotional item. It's kind of like having Black Friday every day of the week for whatever item is out there. So the way it's changed things is it's given consumers the idea that if I see a Groupon, it's more than likely that it's going to be a really good deal on this item and I can't pass it up. So retailers are using this, and consumers have been using this a lot as well. Another kind of the granddaddy of all this is Amazon Mobile. You can do everything there. You can compare your prices, you can price shop, you can read reviews, consumer reviews, and you can make a purchase. So these are just a few of the apps that are out there that have, I think, impacted the pricing game. And when we look at Amazon, I believe it was you, Kevin, that when I was talking with you earlier said Amazon is kind of like the new Walmart. Shoppers are beginning to see Amazon as the price leader for some items, and you can buy a box of nails on Amazon. You can buy pretty much anything you want. Now, whether people actually will, that's a different story. But Amazon, I believe, it seems that they're hoping consumers will equate online with low price. Just as before, it was big boxes, big stores with lots of merchandise stacked to the ceiling equals low price. I think Amazon wants to try to do the same thing, just with online shopping. Of course, the downside is the shipping costs. And I'd like to, with that in mind, I kind of like to talk with our panelists and ask them to kind of comment on Amazon.com as well as some of the apps. And the question would be, how worried should hardware retailers be about smartphones or Amazon? Has this technology significantly changed the way we shop? And I know, Kevin, you probably have a few comments on this, so let's start out with you. And what are your thoughts on how worried hardware retailers should be?
Sure, I appreciate it. Very similar to the article you and I had discussed earlier in the month, that I view both the smartphones as well as Amazon as essentially new disruptors to some degree in this market, which can also be used as a value add. So certainly now the ability for the consumer to be able to access additional information not only about products but also about pricing anywhere by the use of a smartphone certainly does have an impact. But again, it's a matter of how you want to position your particular pricing strategy to that consumer. Many times we've had discussions with a number of retailers that acknowledges the fact that maybe they may be a little higher percentage-wise from a pricing strategy perspective than a big box retailer, or for that matter, even an online option. But it now goes back to convenience. And so the question really comes down to the average buyer is to what is that average buyer willing to spend additional to then have that convenience of getting in the car, driving a block or two, and picking up that item that they need for whatever project they have at home. That's point one. Point two, you mentioned the downside of the shipping costs. With Amazon, when folks are trying to compare a pricing model, they, in many cases, can be misled, because if you have ever done any shopping on Amazon, you will get a price reference. However, when you go to then buy that item and have it shipped, and you have all the different options you have available, whether you want that immediately, in a express ship, or a standard, overnight, or 3 days, whatever the case may be, that's the actual, if you will, basket price for that consumer, and that will have a different outcome when you compare shipping with the actual item on the shelf at your local retailer. So it's one of the things that it's an education for the buyer, but I think any buyers who are actually accessing Amazon on a regular basis understands that, and then can actually then do that comparison and understand that the actual out-of-pocket cost to me needs to include that shipping cost, and that's the price they'll use to compare when shopping a retailer. Hope that's helpful.
Yes, very good thing. Phil, do you have something comment as well?
Well, my thoughts would be this, Jesse. The question you framed it, how worried should people be? And I suppose I kind of take the position that if we worry about every new technology that comes out there, we're going to be worried pretty constantly, because the availability of information now is just coming to us at such an alarming rate, and it really has shrunk the world. And just a few years ago, when we could operate in this kind of bubble, we could operate, we could place the prices on the merchandise that we wanted to put there, and basically just worry about Joe down the street. All of these technologies do change those things. There are some generational differences, of course. I have a smartphone and I have the price scanners on my phone, but I never use it. Now, I think that I should probably put a little caveat there, or an asterisk beside that, and say probably part of that's age-based. So I think that we can't discount the fact that these technologies are out there, nor can we discount the fact that they're probably going to be more prevalent and more used as we have the generational rollovers that we will have. And the advantage that we've enjoyed as local stores, as far as everybody knows us, and everybody of certain generations are indoctrinated to shopping with us rather than other stores, we're going to lose some of those advantages. So it makes it even more important that we concentrate on some of the things that we can then change for the better. The last point that I would make about this, Jesse, is even though those technologies will change and we will be inundated with this information, the basic equations that will decide whether we're profitable, those will remain unchanged. So it's going to necessitate the fact that we do produce margin, that we control expenses. It won't change any of that. It's just going to make things probably a little more in people's faces.
Right, and that's a good point. That's, as I talk with people, the two of you and others, that seemed to be the point, was that there are some things that smartphones and Amazon cannot provide. You're right. If we start worrying about all the technologies, there's always going to be something to worry about, and it does add a new twist here and there. But smartphones and Amazon, if you order online, it still cannot provide that instant gratification of being able to take it out of the store, buy it and take it out of the store and take it home that day. You also are not going to get the product knowledge as much as you would in a brick and mortar store, having those knowledgeable employees talking about how to use a certain product, which is especially important in hardware retailing. And that personal customer service, there's that distance when you're online. So independent retailers, I think the bottom line here is you can still compete with your traditional strengths, those things that you've always been good at. You can still compete, but just realize that the consumer has another tool that you have to learn how to deal with. Another kind of trend that maybe speaks more to the economy than anything else is what's happening with the big boxes. And I've found a few little ideas here that it's kind of interesting. Lowe's last year in their annual report mentioned that they're increasing their number of competitive pricing zones, which means they're getting more localized when it comes to their pricing. They're having smaller. I think it was a significant increase in numbers. So they're understanding that these pricing pressures probably due more to the economy than to technology. And there's fewer lower ticket items. They're trying to drive higher transaction sizes because they're not selling as many large home packages. And they're also as well as, like I said, driving up transaction size. So big boxes as well are feeling pricing pressure. It's not all roses for them, and they're looking for ways to adapt. So I want to get your comments, the two of you, on how you see the big boxes are responding to pricing pressures, or if you want to comment on these bullet points or something else that you see that speaks of trends in the world of kind of the discounters. Either one of you.
Go ahead, Phil.
Okay, thank you, Ken. I thought that was interesting in the article, too, and basically what it said, I have it here in front of me, that they've expanded their local pricing zones from 90 to 210. And I thought that this represented an interesting point here. The article, the thrust of it, and we're all concerned about the technologies that would open up the world, and yet they're saying, hey, wait a second, we've got to be right locally. And so apparently, even with the new technologies that we've described, they have determined that that's where both their challenges and their opportunities lie. But the point that I think that should be underscored about all of this is even though they have systems in place, just like everyone listening to this presentation today has systems in place to address pricing, to address margin, all of those things. It's good to constantly review how those systems came about and question constantly if they can be improved, because there is a tendency, especially as it seems that time is more difficult to come by and we have all this information overload, what do we do with it, that there's a tendency to think, okay, that system's in place, it's working, let's not touch it, rather than saying, hey, how can we improve it? And I think that those big box stores have machinery in place that can constantly reevaluate and question, hey, how are we pricing things? What is everybody else doing? And they can constantly massage and tweak and squeeze out tenths of percentage points, which ultimately, with the numbers they're doing, make huge differences. As far as driving up transaction size, that should be a conversation for managers and their staffs, on a regular basis, on an ongoing basis at store meetings and those types of things. So even though that's interesting from the outside, I think that it's more something that is just something we should all be doing as we modify our policies and the way we go about business.
Kevin, any comments
sure.
on that?
The only thing I guess I would add to that, so I absolutely agree with Phil that these big box chains, if they haven't already adopted a price optimization type of enterprise application to help them in identifying their different price points, they're probably in the process of evaluating them now, or in the process of building their own model versus buying one from commercially available vendors. So there are certainly, and I also agree that on the sheer volume that big boxes are using, that they can make slight adjustments to have pretty big gains. So how does that impact the local retailers? Well, what we're seeing more and more of a trend is that you have certain strategies that big box chains are engaged in that remain at the national level. Now, granted, they're going to localized markets and trying to identify how in which they can compete more strategically and competitively on a price and assortment offerings in that localized market. However, they still do have national restrictions as far as what bulks are they buying, what kind of brands are they buying, and what have you. And so, the way we view, from a competitive analysis perspective, the way we view the differences in the localized chains versus the big box chains is that, they both have a play. Certainly, it now comes down to how do they either complement or compete with one another. And it's been our experience thus far that, as I mentioned earlier in the discussion, that the localized retailers, I think, realize that there's additional value in what they're offering in that customer service and in that local, neighborhood kind of model. And then conversely, on the big box chains, and their value is that, hey, we have such a broad supply. So now it comes down to how do you want to market to those different demographics, and what are the certain attributes that you want to highlight in trying to capture that demographic market. So is it assortment or is it price? And then how do you compare? So I think, in summary, I think the way that we're seeing the trends occur with, the localized and the big markets, the big boxes, in the localized markets, is that what trends are they beginning to see, and how are they going to begin to differentiate themselves? And then from a smaller retailer perspective, how do I compete? And that goes back to just a number of different scenarios where you're either monitoring what are your pricing strategies, are you using enterprise applications to help set those strategies, or are you using more of just promotional ads to see what they're promoting versus what you are offering, or are you actually engaged in some kind of a competitive analysis that enables you to then really match what items you are carrying versus the big boxes and how you price compare? All of them have a play. It just comes back to whatever your unique needs are and requirements are based upon whatever kind of margin growth or margin erosion you're experiencing.
Okay, very, very good. And that's, those are both good points, but I think what speaks to what big boxes are trying to do. And I had a quick question from a listener on what it means, the definition of low-ticket items. What I meant there was, I was talking to one expert that said that it's harder and harder to find those $1 and $2, $3 items in the store. They're trying to package stuff together, whether it's packaging, 2 or 3 items together and say like a buy one get one free kind of deal. Any way that they can try to drive up the transaction size. So this particular analyst that I talked to was back for the article, saying that it was harder and harder to find those low ticket, meaning low dollar amount, say $2 or $3. Instead, the big boxes seem to be trying to drive higher dollars. So hopefully that answered that question. And if there's anything else, you can certainly enter that into the chat. And I just want to kind of end this discussion by a quick look back at a study we did not too long ago. NRHA did Why We Shop, and people, we had a survey went out saying, why do you shop where you do? And price certainly was important, but the bottom line that we found is that retailers need a complete retail strategy. It's not just about low prices. Maybe that was the case 20 years ago, but today people want low prices, but they also want selection, they want inventory, they want knowledgeable employees. Everything seems to be equally important. So if you don't have low prices, you're probably going to be out of the game. It's just kind of assumed that your prices are going to be competitive. That's what our study showed, and I think that's kind of a good way to summarize some of from the independent retail side, what we've been talking about. But next, we want to talk about best pricing practices, get into a little more practical. We've looked at some of the trends. What do we actually do about it? What are some ways that we've, in the past and going forward, that exhibits good pricing? The first one, I think Kevin is pretty familiar with. That's what he does. It's price shopping. Price shopping has evolved from just sending a store manager down the street with a scratch pad to look at numbers, and bring back a few numbers. It's evolved to shopping across the country, not just locally, but also nationally, and it's evolved to electronic services. And it also means you have to, if you're going to go to the trouble to price shop, which everyone should be, you need to make sure people know about that you are low priced and a low price leader. The bottom line is you need to know what everyone else is charging, and this is I think a key practice to pricing. And so I want to just pose a question to our panelists. Is there anything different today about the way retailers should price shop than they might have, say, 10 years ago? Should they be shopping more frequently? Should they be shopping a broader selection of items, a broader selection of competitors? What may have changed in the price shopping strategy in the past few years? Kevin, could you start us off?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So a couple things with regards to what has changed. We're seeing more and more, especially in the hardware vertical, where more and more folks are going online. For example, Menards just recently has announced that they're going to be beginning to show their pricing online. So we have now a real big interest with our customers that want to capture that information. So, with regards to, the frequency of it, as well as, locally versus nationally, it really comes down to your objective, and certainly seasonality plays a part here as well. So from the frequency perspective, it comes back to what time of year are you out there wanting to capture pricing information so that you can understand how your competitors are beginning to lay the groundwork for different type of seasonal items, whether it's fall or winter or summer, whatever the case may be. And that could be as frequently as, weekly. We're seeing changes happen on a weekly basis that you want to be able to track and monitor so that you can understand how you're being viewed from a price competitive perspective. And then certainly what we've also recommended, which is kind of our standard, but I think it's also standard for the industry. It's not necessarily a rival watch suggestion. I think it's somewhat standardized, where more of a monthly review is pretty adequate and or accurate, because it enables you to then kind of keep the pulse of what is going on in the market and begin to compare that versus previous years. So you can begin to see year-over-year trending as to what are other folks' pricing strategies, and that becomes a good analytic component that helps you then make decisions going forward for future strategies. I guess I'll end on the locally versus nationally, and it's been interesting. We've also conducted our own. I won't call it a survey. It's not quite that formalized, but certainly we've had some inquiries into our customers and some of our prospects. We asked the same question as to what's more important to you, the localized pricing and or nationally. And the trend we're seeing more and more is that the focus continues to be on both, but certainly they do have a certain amount of focus on national pricing because of as we mentioned earlier, how the world is becoming smaller and how you can now be able to order your item from, if you're living in California, you can order it from New York or Florida and get it in a few days at a better price, provided that all of your considerations for price and shipping were included. So now the question is how immediate do you need that item? And so I think how retailers are comparing the different items they carry and how hot they move off their shelves will then determine how they want to do the pricing strategy for a localized market versus what do they compare? How do they compare those items on a national level? I hope I'm still on. I just heard a beep.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, I hear you.
So in any event, I guess to summarize and to wrap up is that the localized pricing becomes a very big need. But at the same time, how does that compare when that consumer is going online, whether it's a smartphone or some other mechanism, to then pick up that item elsewhere in the country, is why I think that intelligence is helpful. So you can do that comparison between your localized market and how you compare against markets that are outside your immediate area, but your consumer can still shop there and get that item.
Okay. Phil, would you like to comment on price shopping as well?
The only thing that I would add to that, and that's all good stuff from Kevin, is just a few years ago, the price shop was, hey, you go down to Joe's store, you take a pad. If you're friendly with Joe, you get to the prices. If you're not friendly with Joe, you sneak in, you get the prices. You come out, you try to evaluate those. And quite truthfully, if you had a ongoing program, you were probably outside of the norm. The wonderful thing about the technology that feeds us all of this information, it also makes the shopping easier, and we can make more educated decisions about what we do with the pricing. But it also, I'm afraid, could cause some paralysis by analysis, and that's kind of a cliche you hear a lot to describe many things, but I just think that there are so many numbers coming at us that once again, the thing we really need to drive home and focus on is once we have this information, how do we use it? And how do we benefit from it? And how do we benefit from it today? And then 30 days later, if we evaluate, how do we tweak it to, once again, gain some advantage over all of this information we're gathering? And I'm certain that can be done. But what it does make us do as retailers is become much more aware and much more sophisticated. But in the light of that sophistication, let's not forget the basic things. And those basic things are what Walmart does every time they roll back prices with that whistling smiley face. They draw your attention to that. I've often commented in some of my presentations, I thought it would be cool if they had to put a little devil head everywhere they raised prices, because even though they do have a different of economic scale, they still are faced with the final bottom line that they have to achieve, and that's whether it's Walmart or the big boxes or you or the guy down the street. So those are the only thoughts I'd bring into the conversation. With all of the sophistication, don't forget the basics.
That's a great way to kind of transition to the next thing that I wanted to talk about. It's another important and very basic part of pricing today is variable pricing. It's exactly what Walmart does. You look at the low price over here, but don't see the raised price over there. And there's that's just a very basic strategy. I think it's still the standard. That hasn't changed ever since we've come away from fixed margins. We've gone to the variable margins. And part of the thing is today the consumers want even lower prices. They want everyday low prices, but they also want discounts on top of that, which makes for cash-strapped retailers makes it a little more difficult to find those promotions. I think we have to choose promotions wisely. And the other thing is that variable pricing won't succeed without complete assortments. That's really the key to those loss leaders. You can have a low-cost gallon of paint, but unless you have brushes to sell along with it, unless you have a complete assortment, then you're not going to keep the customer in the store very long. You're also not going to make your margin points that you've lost, and that's just basic, pricing. So in light of that, I want to ask our panelists, as consumers become more aware of prices, how is that affecting variable prices? Are those arrays of price-sensitive items going deeper into the category? So maybe before an assortment or a selection had, 3 or 4 price-sensitive items that you had to be really careful on. Are there more of those items in the category now, or do they have a longer list of items where they can still make good margins? Phil, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I would say that perhaps those are going deeper into the categories. The one thing that when the whole perception, or the concept, I should say, of a variable pricing strategy came about, there were possibly 2 or 3 levels. In that early infant stages, people said, well, it's either price sensitive or it isn't. But we've come to know that there are different levels of price sensitivity, and of course, it's repetition and it's retailing 101. But the things that make items more price sensitive, if it's a high ticket item, if it's an exhaustible item that people buy with regular frequency, they're much more aware of an item than they buy just once in a while. If it's an item that's advertised heavily, it's more price sensitive. For example, a 25-foot tape, it has been one of the advertised items for years. So that makes that more price sensitive. If it's a new item, it's often price sensitive. So those things being said, as you examine, probably, I want to take you back just a second, that the system you're using is probably the product of something. It could be something that you've used for years, that's the way you've always done it, or it could be that you have a vendor that says, these items are price sensitive, these are not, or these have achieved this level of price sensitivity. I think that there is a place where some of that local information can really aid you, and you will probably find more than a handful of items that, even though on a more national level these items are sensitive, on a local level they're not as much so. So that constant evaluation as far as those differentiations from what might be a national program or even a regional program will help you achieve more added margin points in that regard.
Okay, very good. And Kevin, as you're very close to the price shopping world, are you seeing more price sensitive items now, or are those levels changing? Is kind of the model changing of variable pricing?
I'm not sure the model is necessarily changing per se. I guess it goes back to, I mentioned earlier about seasonality. It depends upon where you are in the market. That will help with the variable pricing to some degree, as far as what items you want to highlight and how sensitive those pricing may be, given the certain, whether it's the weather outside, whether it's snowing or you're dealing with other kinds of conditions that will help with your variable pricing from that perspective. But I guess it comes back to, what is your overall pricing strategy? Are you focusing around price skimming or penetration in pricing? Are you trying to establish the market from a penetration pricing strategy perspective? Do you have a bunch of loss leaders you want to be leveraging? What about your closeout strategy? Are you doing anything around closeouts? And then it comes back to your membership or trade discounting. What is that? What happens when you want to use that card, that special card that allows you an additional 10% discount? And how do you leverage that in your pricing strategy overall? So price variables, I guess, really comes down to what's your unique strategy and objective. And what we're seeing in general, as far as a trend, if I can be so bold to call it a trend, is that I think right now there's been a big push to these memberships. How can I get my repeat customers coming in, and how do I do that in a way that I have a price for the average consumer, but you're a special member, I have a variable price or a discount price for you for visiting my store? And then how do I also market to those members? If I have a big enough membership, then kind of use my promotion strategies to then market to them more uniquely, or do I include additional discounts to them as a result of you being a member? So here's my promotional price, but because you're a member, it's another 10% off. So, those kind of strategies, coupled with, where you're located around the country, as well as how you're trying to compete, with other competitors in the market, how they're implementing their pricing strategies, all those are certain attributes you should be considering certainly in your pricing strategy. Now the question is which one of these do you want to leverage, and how often are you faced with a price skimming strategy, for example, versus trying to penetrate a market and get more market share, or maybe you have a closeout strategy. How does that come into play? All those different things go into play when you're trying to, I think, identify that variable pricing. And then, again, coming from the competitive side of the house, certainly your gauge can also be what is the market willing to bear, i.e., what are my competitors doing? Hope that's helpful.
Right. Yes, very much. It is helpful. And what I mentioned here earlier, it's, what are my competitors doing? And I think another important point to bring up is that I think a mistake that a few retailers out there might make is that don't be priced below the price leader. If Lowe's is selling something, for $5.99, there's no reason to sell it for less than $5.99 because generally people think of that as the price leader. And if they can get $5.99 out of that product, then it's likely that you can too. And so that all comes, I think, plays a part of that variable pricing. Kind of another part of this in terms of strategies, there's even if you just add a few pennies to a price, it adds up over time. And I've talked to one retailer who uses an aggressive rounding strategy. Maybe you're just adding 5 cents or 10 cents here, but if you can, without making a difference in the way that price is perceived, say if you have a product that's priced for $6.79, well, is the consumer going to see a lot of difference between $6.79 and $6.99? Likely not. There's certain thresholds that you can, if you don't cross that threshold, then the consumer is still going to see that price is the same, or it's not going to see much of a difference, and you can gain those extra margin points. 10 cents here, 20 cents there, that all adds up. If you take it across the store and the turns that you'll have throughout the year, that can add a lot of dollars to your bottom line. So kind of what I want to, and this slide is mainly just talking about a few of those little pricing strategies that you can use. Another retailer will on a monthly basis review his top 100 items in each department. He'll take the top 100 most profitable, the top 100 least profitable, and see, do I need to be raising my prices on these? Are they selling well? Are they not selling? Should I lower my prices? And he's constantly adjusting, not afraid to change prices. It's not a set the price once and leave it strategy. Just doesn't work anymore. As you mentioned earlier, Kevin, it's almost a monthly basis people should be reviewing their prices. And when it comes to pricing, pricing is not like the game show The Price is Right. It's not. We're not guessing on our prices. It's not a game. Changing prices, when you do it, should be well informed. You need, I think it's a good practice to know why you're changing a price and not just do it randomly. So I want to kind of throw those few points out there and ask the two of you any comments on that, or some strategies that retailers can use to gain those few extra margin points. It's not necessarily an overhaul of the pricing, but just tweaks here and there that can help you be better priced. Kevin, do you have anything to say about that?
Sure. So I am aware that there are a number of different nationwide retailers that have, essentially their own pricing zones based upon the demographics, and then I think that to some degree they're making suggestions based upon where you're located, and here's your pricing models. Whether it's also just tracking your KVIs, your key value items, as to what those pricing models may be, and will that impact other categories or other departments inside your store. But as far as the aggressive rounding and what have you, again, we know we have partners out there, other software solutions that help with that kind of adjustment, where you're going to have a recommendation from, say, corporate that says, here's kind of where your pricing model should be. And then let's take a look. If you were to implement some of those pricing strategies based upon where you're at today, have you maintained that comparison to what the corporation is saying, that these are the demographics that our studies have shown that your pricing strategies and your pricing model should look something like this? What would that yield you if in the event you would implement that kind of a strategy? Would that increase margin significantly? Would you be able to right-size certain things? So there are, I think, significant benefits there. Now the question is how do you choose those? So I think our recommendation and what we've seen to work pretty well in the market is first and foremost, validate. Does the corporate model make sense for your particular localized market? That's first point. Second point, then compare that against, maybe run a sample test against your KVIs and figure out, if I was to take just our KVIs and I was to adjust our pricing based upon what our recommendations are coming in from one location or another, would that make sense? I guess the whole elasticity issue is whether or not that particular item can bear that additional increase and or would that impact volume. And there's a lot of science that goes into that. So I guess I don't know if I'm giving you a very fair answer or a definitive answer, other than to say that there's a lot of components to pay attention to there, certainly, and it's a matter of aggregating all that information that you can then make an informed decision based upon those different items of feedback, whether it's coming from a central office, whether it's coming from your knowledge of your KVIs and the elasticity they offer based upon different seasons, or you're looking at your competitive landscape in your localized market.
Yeah, that's a good. I know. I think both of us were alluding to. We kind of got the aggressive rounding idea from Margin Master, which is I know a lot of times works in conjunction with Rival Watch. It's a service provided by I think it's Retailer Soft up in Michigan.
You bet.
Brad Green, an ace retailer up there, and certainly, he does a great job of helping retailers do that. And it's Margin Master if anyone wants to look them up. But it's also, kind of the point, and maybe Phil, you can talk about this too, is that no price raise is too small. Don't be worried about adding a few extra pennies, because even pennies will add up. Do you have any comments, Phil, on kind of those small pricing strategies like this?
Well, I will say in response to Jesse, one of the first guys I ever worked with, one of the first lessons he ever taught me was, hey, if you'll take care of the very small things, the larger things tend to take care of themselves. I don't know if that's completely true, but I do know that the more attention you pay to detail, the better off you are. Now, I think we've pretty well covered a lot of the things that can affect, the price shopping and the price rounding and establishing those retail prices. So in a conversation about margin, the way this one started, I think then that we'd have to broaden it out a little bit and say, okay, do we have the product adjacencies set right so that when we are forced to be very competitive on some of these items on the counter, we either flag those items, or in addition to flagging those items to draw them to people's attention, you also flag the items that are adjacent that you can make some margin on. And then instead of looking at the margin on an individual item, you're looking at a margin on a composite. And I think that's where our greatest opportunity lies when we take the conversation past, hey, just how do we set a retail price on an existing item? Because you have all sorts of parameters that come into play there. How do we keep people in the store longer? How do we have them penetrate the store deeper? And even though it might not on the surface seem a valid talking point in a conversation on pricing per se, when the conversation switches to margin, then it's very appropriate. So I would say then that would be the things to focus on, those things where you can drive composite margins rather than just margins on an individual item.
Okay, that's very good. We had a question that comes in here, and maybe I'll just read it and see if either one of you have a comment on it. A retailer writes in and says, "What do I do about when Home Depot puts my store name and price by their product in their store, and I am higher priced, and it is not necessarily a competitive item? How do I react to that? I have twice as many SKUs as they do." What would you say to a retailer? I'll read it again. What do I do about when Home Depot puts my store name and price by their product in their store, and they're not higher priced, and it's not necessarily a competitive item? Do you have any thoughts or comments for this retailer? Either one of you? Speak up.
My first reaction would be that I'm sure that this retailer is expressing that idea would make me angry. And after I got past that, I think that probably what I would do, I would find items that I was priced better on. And there will be those items, and if I had to make those items by lowering some prices on some particular items, I would do that, raise some on the others to protect my margin. Then I would do the same thing. I mean, I don't know that in the final analysis either one of those steps would be good and viewed well by customers, but it's kind of protecting your own turf and showing that you are competitive.
Okay. Yeah, the thing I would add, and I'm not a violent person, but my first reaction was I'd go to the manager of that Home Depot and punch him in the nose. But besides that,
probably what he wants to do.
I would say that that certainly, I mean that this shows, you know, on a positive note, I would argue that also shows the fact that, you know, they view you as a threat, and that could be a good thing. You know, the fact that you are taking market share to the point where he or that particular branch has to identify you specifically in your pricing shows the fact that, you know, hey, how do I glean more of your customers? So I also would echo, you know, Phil's comments. I think it is a matter of coming back and figuring out, okay, so, you know, tit for tat. You know I have other items that I can be very competitive against, and so, you know, maybe it's an opportunity for a promotional type of a campaign. That you can then go out and just essentially just do the same kind of a strategy back as far as here's some items that Home Depot's priced at, here's what I'm priced at, and then I would also just, you know, rely on what are your core values, which goes back to your customer service, which is always going to be better than what you get from a big box chain and from a localized market, and then also speak about the assortment. A lot of times we're seeing more and more, because part of that competitive analysis is around assortment, is to figure out, you know, does that localized retailer know their market so well that their assortment is going to be far more catered to that consumer than that big box chain that has other requirements that they have to then abide by. So there's opportunities we can still be a differentiating factor there to show the fact that you are still a better option given that localized market. But again, I guess I would just end on the fact that it's somewhat of a compliment, the fact that they're going to go out of their way to try to identify that your price is X and their price is Y. It shows the fact that you are a threat. It's a good thing.
And it kind of goes into what I wanted to talk about next, was managing price perception. And I know this doesn't work for everyone, but a lot of retailers have found that price matching guarantees, not everyone can match prices, but I think a lot of retailers have found that this is a strategy that they can use. One thing about price matching guarantees that of those who I've talked with, everybody's going to notice it, but not everybody's going to use it. Few retailers will, or few customers will actually challenge you on a price match, and it tends to be more about perception than anything else. You know, you don't want to lose a customer over a small price difference. Not all, you know, in this retailer's case, it may have not have been a $2 price difference, but if it is a $2 price difference, is that worth the customer leaving the store and going somewhere else? So one thing we found, and I just want to get our panelists' comments on this as well, when it comes to pricing, a big part of it is price perception. And how important do you think a price matching guarantee is to today's consumer? And what would you tell a retailer who may be hesitant to try it? Kevin, you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So so I'm in California, and I see a lot of these commercials that come across from Walmart about there's this pretty intelligent campaign they have about match it, match it, match it. And it has this interesting little dialogue about how it goes through the back office. The folks who are actually transporting the goods to the stores and all that, they're all saying match it. And it's a good campaign to kind of help drive the point home that by going to Walmart, you're going to get the best, lowest price. So there's some value, I would argue, in establishing yourself as someone who, as an entity or an organization, that you want to earn your customers' business. So therefore, you're willing to match any other price, because that way, at least when that decision, going back to the comment made earlier with regards to the Home Depot mentioning someone's store and price per se, the way you can level that playing field is to adopt that strategy about match it. Bring something else, bring an item in from anywhere else, and we'll match that price. It actually does serve a couple different purposes, and so I'm a proponent of it, I guess, is my underlying tone here, is that, it certainly helps you draw in more customers because they know that, no matter what, you'll match the price of an advertised item someplace else. That's always a good thing. It's going to help with your certainly your customer base, but also with your volume. Secondly, it also gives you good intelligence. I mean, that's real-time intelligence. Now you have your customer base bringing to you the pricing strategies of your competitors. You begin to see that trend happening more and more to figure out, okay, what do you need to do with your distributors or others to figure out how do you get a lower price? Because now if your neighborhood competitor around the corner is carrying the same items from the same distributor or manufacturer, then how can they offer that price unless they're doing something with that distributor to help either get a different price, or are they taking it? Are they taking a little bit of a loss, but they're promoting something else, some other item associated with that particular assortment? So those are all, I think, good data points from the market that are useful in helping establish your strategy, and they'll also help build your perception, your brand perception to your consumer, that you're here to service them and that you'll make sure that you always match the prices. So I'm a proponent of it.
Okay. Phil, what are your comments on price matching?
There's an old cliche out there that says, say something loud enough, long enough, and everybody will buy into it eventually. I think there's a little bit of that at work here. There's a wonderful book. It's not a new book, but it's a book by a guy named Barry Schwartz. It's called The Paradox of Choice. And in that book, he talks about a thing that has about buyer's remorse. Once they make a purchase, that he calls it the opportunity cost. If they buy something from you, then the opportunity cost is that they could have bought that same item from somewhere else, possibly for less money. With a price matching guarantee in place, that helps alleviate that. It's just a subtle assurance that, hey, we are competitive. And I don't know that anywhere that ever says we're always going to be the lowest price, but the reoccurring theme when you talk about this with anyone in almost in any situation, they say, yeah, I have it, but not many people use it. And I guess that's the great reassurance from it. The one thing I would say is that if you don't have a policy like this in place and you elect to use one, then when somebody brings that in, then you have to happily and readily match that price. So be prepared to do that, knowing ahead of time that it's going to be a small fraction of the people. So I think the benefits far outweigh what you stand to lose. And, if you're on the fence with this, you're uncomfortable about it, it's always something that you could put in place, try for X amount of time, and then if you feel it's been a bad thing, obviously you retract it or change it up somehow. But that would be my thoughts. I think overall it's a good thing.
Okay. Well, thanks for those comments. We're just running short on time, so I'll kind of try to get through these last couple slides. Price perception isn't all about, there's many other elements, of course, in price perception other than price matching. Image is everything. If you don't have a good-looking store, if things aren't merchandised well, it doesn't matter what your prices are, people are probably not going to shop there. You need to tell customers where to look. You need to use good merchandising. Like Phil mentioned earlier, Walmart has that big ball next to every price that is rolled back. And so they're telling customers, hey, look here, this is a low price. You use merchandising like end caps to promote your low-dollar items. Use all those tricks that discounters use to create that price perception. And we were to kind of go away with any questions to ask ourselves or some things if you're looking at your pricing. And you can still make money in hardware retailing, but ask yourself, when did I last price shop my competition? Was it 5 years ago? Was it 5 weeks ago? Is it as frequently as I should be price shopping? And how long has it been since I changed those prices? Have I been responding to the changes in my competitors? And also, why are my prices the way they are? Is there a good reason why I've priced things, the hammers and the paint and the paint brushes the way they are? They just kind of, am I using the suggested retail price? Am I using my wholesaler's prices? Am I using price shopping? Why are the prices that way, and what can I do about it to make more money? Because in the end, I think that's what we all want to make. So I want to go ahead and just wrap this up since we're right at 3 o'clock. Sorry we got a little bit late start, but I think it's been all good information. And I don't know if there's anything else that either one of you wanted to add as closing comments before we take off.
I just thank you for the opportunity, Jesse. Greatly appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
I would echo that, Jesse, and thank everybody for the time they put into this. Hopefully they found it interesting, informative, and hopefully we'll see everybody down the road somewhere.
Well, thanks to both of you, and I've I want to thank you from here from Hardware Retailing. My contact information is here if you have any other questions. If you would like a copy of this, there will be a recording available on nrha.org in a few days once we get the recording, as well as a download, a PDF download of the slide presentation. And don't forget, you can also, if you haven't read the article in Hardware Retailing, that goes along with this as well. Phil Mitchell, we thank you, and Kevin Kane, here's their contact information if you have any questions about their businesses or want more information from them. So thank you all, and have a good rest of the week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jesse.